Lewis Hamilton has finally fired back at Ferrari president John Elkann after weeks of growing tension, criticism, and chaos inside Maranello, and his response has shaken the entire Formula One world. What started as a disappointing season for Ferrari has now exploded into a public power struggle between the team's most powerful figure and its most decorated driver. Elkann's brutal comments, telling Hamilton and Charles Leclerc to talk less and focus on driving, were meant to sound like motivation. Instead, they ignited a full-blown crisis that has left Ferrari's leadership divided, the drivers humiliated, and the paddock stunned. Hamilton, who joined Ferrari to live a dream, has quickly found it becoming something closer to a nightmare, one that he's finally decided to confront head-on. Inside Maranello, the mood has turned toxic. Elkann's outburst came after yet another disastrous weekend in Brazil, where both Ferrari cars failed to finish, and Hamilton once again became the easy target. The president's remarks have been slammed across the motorsport world, with critics accusing him of bad leadership and even members of the Ferrari organization privately admitting that the speech did more harm than good. To make matters worse, whispers have emerged that some engineers were offended by the improvement documents Hamilton personally submitted to help the team recover its competitiveness, a move meant to inspire progress that's now being misread as arrogance. Combine that with the revelation that Ferrari spends nearly £2.5 million per weekend on Hamilton's program, and the tension inside the Scuderia has reached boiling point. Hamilton's answer wasn't loud, but it was devastatingly clear. After being told to keep quiet, he chose honesty instead. "I've been living in a nightmare for a while," he said, a raw admission that exposed just how deep the problems go. His words weren't aimed at the mechanics or engineers. They were a message to the top. He's tired of carrying the blame for a car that isn't delivering. Tired of seeing public criticism replace leadership. Yet behind that frustration, there's still the determination of a 7-time champion who refuses to give up. It's the same quiet defiance that's carried him through every setback of his career, and now it's directed at the heart of Ferrari itself. This time, the whole world is watching, with the Italian press turning on Elkann, former drivers calling for accountability, and Hamilton standing his ground. Ferrari finds itself on the edge of an internal reckoning. What happens next could reshape not only the team's future, but also Hamilton's legacy in red. So, before we dive into everything the British legend has said and the shocking details now leaking out of Maranello, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and stay until the very end. Because what's happening behind the scenes at Ferrari right now might just be the most explosive story of the entire Formula One season. From the outside, Ferrari's chaos looks like a team slowly collapsing under the weight of its own ambition. But from the inside, it's something much darker. A clash of leadership, pride, and identity that has now exploded into one of the biggest internal crises the Scuderia has faced in a decade. Lewis Hamilton's response to John Elkann's brutal comments wasn't just a reaction. It was a statement of defiance from a man who's had enough of being treated as a scapegoat. After weeks of silence, the 7-time world champion finally fired back, and his words, calm, measured, but razor-sharp, have shaken Ferrari to its core. The dream of uniting Hamilton and Ferrari, two icons of motorsport history, has instead become a public power struggle between a driver fighting for respect and a president desperate to save face. The chaos began after Brazil, where Ferrari endured one of its most humiliating weekends of the season. Charles Leclerc was eliminated in the opening corner through no fault of his own, while Hamilton's race dissolved into chaos after collisions with Carlos Sainz and Franco Colento left his SF25 nearly undrivable. The car lost almost 40 points of downforce, forcing Ferrari to retire him from the race. The frustration reached boiling point when the stewards handed Hamilton a 5-second penalty for the incident, prompting his furious radio message, "These guys are a joke." It was the sound of a man who had given everything, only to be failed by both the car and the system around him. But the true explosion came later, not from Hamilton, but from John Elkann himself. At the center of all this stands Hamilton, the £2.5 million per weekend superstar who was brought in to lead Ferrari back to glory. And now he's being accused by some within the team of not delivering enough for the money he earns. Former F1 driver Robert Dornbos went as far as to say they pay him millions, but he doesn't deliver anything. It's a statement that sounds provocative, but it ignores the real issue. Hamilton hasn't been given the machinery to perform. The SF25 is a deeply flawed car, unpredictable under braking, unstable in high-speed corners, and overly sensitive to changes in temperature and wind. No driver, not even Hamilton, can win with a car that refuses to behave. And yet, the most ironic twist in this saga is that Hamilton has been trying to fix the very problems that Ferrari's leadership keeps ignoring. Earlier this year, he sent detailed performance and improvement documents to Maranello, essentially a winning blueprint based on his years of experience at Mercedes. These were meant to help the team find direction, identify weaknesses, and accelerate development for 2026. But instead of gratitude, he was met with discomfort. Some engineers and managers inside Ferrari took offense, seeing the documents as criticism rather than guidance. Ted Kravitz from Sky F1 even suggested Hamilton may have unintentionally insulted Ferrari by being too direct about what needed to change. In truth, that's precisely what Ferrari needs: direction, structure, and honesty. Former team principals and drivers haven't held back either. Günther Steiner, never one to mince words, called Elkann's remarks a sign of bad leadership, arguing that great teams protect their drivers, not shame them. Jenson Button and Karun Chandhok also defended Hamilton, pointing out that no driver in the world could consistently perform with a car this inconsistent. They reminded fans that Ferrari's problems are structural, not personal. Leadership decisions and development stagnation are what's really holding the team back. Drivers are symptoms, not the cause. Inside Maranello, though, the damage is done. Engineers are reportedly demoralized, drivers are under pressure, and team morale is at its lowest since the disastrous 2020 season. Even those loyal to Elkann admit that his attempt at motivation backfired completely. It has widened the gap between leadership and the race team, creating tension when unity is desperately needed. Some even compare Ferrari's current state to its pre-Schumacher era, a team full of talent, but crippled by ego. Hamilton's words, "a nightmare," suddenly sound less like exaggeration and more like truth. For Hamilton, the frustration isn't just about results, it's about purpose. He joined Ferrari not just to drive, but to help rebuild one of the greatest teams in history. What he's encountered instead is resistance, pride, and an organization struggling to accept outside ideas. Yet, even amid all this turmoil, he remains composed. His calm defiance has reminded everyone why he's a 7-time champion, because he leads with integrity, even when surrounded by chaos. And now, as the paddock watches the fallout unfold, the focus shifts to Ferrari's next move. Will John Elkann apologize or double down? Will Vasseur defend his drivers or bow to pressure from above? The answers will determine more than just Ferrari's reputation. They'll define whether this team can survive its own internal war. Hamilton's bombshell wasn't a tantrum. It was a wake-up call, a challenge to a leadership that seems lost, a plea for unity, and a reminder that silence doesn't build champions. Accountability does. If Ferrari truly wants to win again, it must first listen to the man it hired to lead it there. Because the moment a driver like Lewis Hamilton feels unheard, the battle is already lost. If you want to know how this extraordinary conflict between Hamilton and Ferrari's leadership unfolds, whether it ends in redemption or complete implosion, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and stay until the end. Because what's happening right now inside Maranello might just define the future of Ferrari and the final chapter of Lewis Hamilton's legendary career.